Greetings to all and a warm welcome to our latest live webcast, Cyber Resilience Act, Security with a Seal of Approval. We're thrilled you've decided to join us for this enlightening masterclass. With each episode, we provide new highlights, technical tips, and success stories that will leave you inspired and ready to get your protection, licensing, and security techniques another step closer to perfection. At WIBU-SYSTEMS, we empower software publishers and intelligent device manufacturers with cutting-edge technologies, new business models, and tailor-made consulting training. Let us help you upgrade, optimize, and automate your entire license lifecycle management so you can focus on monetizing your business at a higher level. My name is David Payne. I'm a product manager at WIBU-SYSTEMS, and I'm delighted to have you here with us today. We are joined by Stefan Bamberg, Director of Sales and Key Account Management, and Pierre Wichmann, Chief Information Security Officer and Data Protection Officer, both from the headquarters of WIBU-SYSTEMS at Karlsruhe. To give you a roadmap of today's session, here's what we will be covering. The Cyber Resilience Act, the CRA, introduces new cybersecurity standards for digital products in the EU, requiring manufacturers, importers, and distributors to meet specific security obligations. With an emphasis on product security, companies must now address core CRA requirements, including risk mitigation measures and detailed documentation. CodeMeter offers key functions to help businesses align with CRA requirements, enhancing security in an increasingly connected digital landscape. Before we dive into the content, let's quickly address a few housekeeping items. For all of you tuning in today, we've set aside a special segment at the end of the session exclusively for questions and answers. We warmly encourage you to drop your questions into the live chat box as they come to mind. If we can't get to your question during the live session, rest assured we'll make it a priority to engage with you individually at a later time to address your inquiries. This session is being recorded, and a link to the on-demand replay will be sent straight to your inbox within the next couple of days. That way, you can revisit the insights shared today at your leisure. And don't forget, stick around for the entire live session and seize the opportunity to win an invaluable 4 hours of personalized CodeMeter consultation with our industry-leading experts. As the webinar concludes, a new browser tab will automatically open, presenting you with a quick quiz. We'll randomly select a lucky winner from those who answer correctly and make the big announcement when we release the webinar replay. Be aware also that this brief questionnaire includes additional questions aimed at gauging the quality of this masterclass. While these questions are optional, your valuable feedback will empower us to enhance the quality of our offerings and tailor our online events more precisely to meet your specific needs. And now, without further delay, I'm delighted to hand over the reins to Stefan. Stefan, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Dave. Welcome to our webinar, Cyber Resilience Act, Security with a Seal of Approval. My name is Stefan Bamberg. I'm here together with my colleague, Pierre Wichmann, and we both want to introduce you today to the Cyber Resilience Act and want to help to master your challenges in being compliant to the CRA. So first of all, what is the goal of all these security requirements that you face in the meantime in the market? The goal is the protection of consumers and companies that buy or use products with a digital component. And you face several of these regulations in the market with your digital products. So the first one is a standard which is called IEC 62443, which is a standard for cybersecurity for operational technology and automation systems. We also have the NIS2, EU regulation to enforce security in networks and information systems. So it belongs more to the company standards that you have to support. We have in the meantime also the EU regulation for artificial intelligence. And last but not least, we have the Cyber Resilience Act, which is a EU regulation to enforce security in products with digital components. So we have divided that webinar in two parts. Per will introduce you some legal and background information about the Cyber Resilience Act. And my second part is to bring you closer to how CodeMeter is able to support your compliance to the CRA standard. So, Per, it's your stage.
Well, my name is Per Wichmann, and I want to present some of the formal and legal aspects of the Cyber Resilience Act, and want to describe when you will be subject to the Cyber Resilience Act and when you're not subject to the Cyber Resilience Act. So first, again, the most important idea of a Cyber Resilience Act is to have safer products in the field and to enable the customers to use them safely. Currently, with products with digital components, it's not always the case that they can be used safely, and they are something like safety by default. So many people use digital products and they use in very unsecure way. My favorite example is the cheap webcams that are around that regularly are visited by other people who peek into living rooms or dormitories. So this is the goal of everything, to enable the customer to use it safe. So the whole Cyber Resilience Act is based on the view of the customer itself. And at the beginning, the maybe most important sentence I would say, I'm not a lawyer. Cannot give you any legal advice. And if you want to be sure, you have to consult somebody yourself. The Cyber Resilience Act is around in, I guess, about a dozen different versions. Translated versions sometimes also differ from the original ones. So I'm not sure if I have kept track of all differences and all changes. It's up to you to do the final judgment and get your legal advice on this, what happens and not. So Stefan already said your product is subject to Cyber Resilience Act if you have a digital component. On one hand, this means if you have such a physical thing like a broom or a sheet of paper, you're not subject to Cyber Resilience Act. But if your component does have some electronics embedded, you're probably. But only if your device makes a direct or indirect connection to other devices or a network. Surprisingly, this rules out some items that I would say, yes, you should care about security. And I would say you should also care about security, even if you don't connect to another device or another network. And in basic, the idea is if your product contains some kind of firmware or software, then you're subject to Cyber Resilience Act, regardless whether it's some kind of automatic vacuum cleaner, some handy or whatever. But you can see, oh, there's an unless. So I may not even be affected by the Cyber Resilience Act. Yes, I know, but the exceptions are rare and don't count too much. The left-hand side is you don't have a product at all. You only have some demonstrators are testing some things for a limited time. So don't employ tests that stay in the field forever. Or on the right side, if you have a medical device or are involved into civil air traffic, you have much higher requirements than the Cyber Resilience Act will place on you. So Cyber Resilience Act directly omits these types of devices and says, we're not dealing with this. They are dealt separately with. So Cyber Resilience Act, what really does it affect? It has two components. One is the product properties, and the other one is the customer communication. On the product side, The Cyber Resilience Act covers everything from the initial design to development, production, deployment to the customer, and also decommissioning. So what does it mean for you? Obviously, if you do a product, you have to make some concept, but with CRA, you have documented. Cyber Resilience Act is mostly about documentation, that what you have done and that you have done correctly. You have to document that you have, for example, a risk analysis in your product, in your concept. And if you have risks, you have to have countermeasures. And also the development process. If in the development process there are some important decisions, as there always are, they have to be documented. Production, you also have to document what you're doing and what you're not doing. On the other hand, the communication side to the customer has to have some possibility to communicate with you. You have to communicate with the customer directions, how to use the product and how to use the product securely. And you have to provide the customer with all necessary means to operate the product securely and to do that easily. Also, for example, to reset the product to a secure state after using it for some time. And how do you now comply with the CRA? You comply if you produce a declaration of conformity. What does it contain? Well, an identification of the product, identification of the producer, and, for example, also identification of the standards that have been set up when the product was designed. Depending on what your product is, in what region your product is, you have to have comply with different standards for computer security. For example, Stefan already mentioned at the beginning the IEC for cybersecurity. Partly it's NIST, but NIST is something that your customer has to apply with. And at the bottom you see it has to be signed. Question is, who does the signature and who does it sign to what authority? The default class, where the EU says probably 90% of the products will fall in, you have a self-declaration. And you have a self-declaration with no strict limits of what standards you have to rely to. The next thing is the important class. For the first one, you have a self-declaration, but you also have to observe the relevant standards for your field of operation. Which standard these are, that remains to you to be selected, or at least to a judge later on. And if you have a really important thing, you have to have a third party to do the attestation. And with the critical stuff, you have to do a complete evaluation to common criteria. But I guess the last one will only affect very few people. Most people that will fall into this category will also fall into automotive or medical or something like that. How to select between class 1 and class 2? Well, class 2 contains the more security relevant things. For example, if your device or your product is solely constructed to be a secure element in some kind, then you're probably class 2. And if your device is a microprocessor or something, you most frequently fall into class 1. So most products will fall into class 1. Only the key products will fall into class 2. But even there, the current legislation and status of the CRA is not really consistent with everything. for example, intelligent meters or smart meters are explicitly listed for critical devices that need to have a formal verification. So at this point, the CRA is not really conclusive about what really happens and what doesn't happen. You have some discretion to choose from, but you always know at a later point, some judge will try to see whether your choosing of topic was correct or not. So be careful when choosing this one, and seek somebody professional to give you advice on that. So what will be the requirements for CRA? As we already said, there are some things. One is on the requirement, on the product side. The other one will be manufacturer side. On the product side, first of all, you have to do a risk analysis. And you're probably doing risk analysis, but you have to do the risk analysis from the point of view of the customer. So not only of a company point of view, but explicit for the customer who uses the product. And you don't have to do the risk analysis only for the intended use. You also have to do it for foreseeable use. So if you have some product that is intended to be used by children, you might also think about what happens if some adults use it and use this product in their professional environment. Does this pose different problems? An example might be some assistances in automobile cases. I know automobiles are excluded, but just for the example, there are some assistances that try to keep you in the lane. Intended use is to support you if you have a short glitch, a look to the side or something. The foreseeable use is that people say, oh, I have autopilot, and it will keep me on the lane for about 2 hours when I'm driving. So this will pose different risks, because in the latter one, the driver might completely not attend to the traffic. So it will pose significantly different risks. And if you identify a risk, you have to put some countermeasures in place. Yeah, you can see here, countermeasures should be balanced with the risks. But keep in mind that the risks will change over time. There will be additional risks. So it might be a good thing if you implement countermeasures that seem a little bit overdrive at the start, but later on it might be the case that these really are effective and will be needed. What you also have to do is look for bugs. Yes, in most products you include some other components, digital components in this case, so there might be CVEs around. You have to monitor for your components you're integrating, the CVEs, how critical they are. CRA requires you that if the product is delivered or brought into market, there should not be any known exploitable problems. Well, exploitable is somewhat definable, because you also in exploit if there's a risk involved. So it's all again up to your discretion if the risk is worth countermeasuring or not. But again, somebody might check on this later on. CRA also requires you to explicitly take into account the basic security items like confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity. They might not all be really important in every case, but in some cases they will be more important than others. For example, if you have a webcam, confidentiality is probably an issue. Integrity and authenticity, well, not so much. On the other hand, if you try to provide some measures of identification, confidentiality is not really an issue, but authenticity, that's just what you're trying to do. So you have to judge how important the goals are with your product and what to do without them. And you have, as I already said, you have to document everything. You don't have to deliver all the documents to the end customer. The end customer does not need to know your design decisions when you design the product, because this is internal. But at a later point, if something really bad happened, some judge will come up to you and say, hey, let's see the documentation. Have you cared about this? Was your security analysis and risk analysis conclusive, or did you miss some major things that you shouldn't have missed? You will always miss some things. But if you come up with a risk analysis that is quite sensible, everybody will say, okay, that looks good. You've done your risk analysis and everything. But if you say, oh, yes, we did it. You did it in a meeting, but we didn't document it. So that means you don't have the risk analysis, but you have the problem. Well, if you produce it, you probably do the same thing you're doing right now. Additionally, your documentation. For example, tests have to be documented. What is tested, and did the tests lead to good results? Patches, secure update procedures. You have to document how to do it. You have to document how you look for some weaknesses, CVEs. So you have your software bill of materials and have to check them against the global CVE databases. And if you can show, we have done these checks, you're probably on the safe side. But if you say, yeah, somebody looked at it, you're not on the safe side. You have to provide the customer with information, and explicitly with information of how to use the product securely. And if he has used the product for half a year, you have to give him some information how to reset it to a secure state again. Well, in most cases, or in many cases, this will reset to factory standard, and hopefully you have already integrated some secure by default design. And there's also the possibility for the customer to contact you. You as a manufacturer, or you as the person who brought it into market. What happens if you don't comply with the CRA? Well, CRA also proposes some sanctions. And sanctions will apply if you didn't do the risk analysis completely, if you don't have the correct technical documentation or the user information or any other thing. And it also will apply if you made gave false advice in the documentation and had false statements. And is it critical what happens? Yes, it is critical. The numbers on the right will tell you, well, it's really critical. And the 50 million euro is at or 2.5% of annual turnover. The question is, what is more? So with 50 million, I guess I can threaten most of you, but I can't threaten a Google or something or Microsoft. I will threaten Google or Microsoft with 2.5% of the annual turnover. So if you're having problems, in most cases, the fines will not be that high, but they might go up. And even for misleading information and documentation, you might be up to 5 million euro. So when does this apply? This does apply if you bring the product into the field in Europe. So even if you come from outside Europe and you sell the products into Europe, or you have some third party selling your products in Europe, they will apply to Cyber Resilience Act, and they will apply to these sanctions. Well, that's what I would say to background. So back to Stefan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Per, for all that background information of the Cyber Resilience Act. To avoid any sanctions, let's talk about how can WIBU-SYSTEMS with their CodeMeter technology support your compliance journey. First of all, licensing supports compliance. The question is who uses what and how. So before we start in a deeper view in the CRA text to show how we can support you concerning product security, let's talk about licensing as a base. How does licensing works? So on the left side, you see your application, your digital product that you want to sell in the European community. You have your application, you have several functions, sub-functions in your application, and you want to license this functionality, typically because you want to earn money. But here we have now the focus on being compliant to the Cyber Resilience Act. So it typically works that your customers activate the licenses that you roll out to them, so that they have a basic license to start your application. They have licenses according to the several functions that you want to offer to your customers. Each function has an own license in this case, and you decide where you want to store the licenses at the end customer side. So that could be a dongle. Dongles are not that. It's the best way and the best mobility way to have licenses stored. But we also have plain software licenses in our program, the CMX licenses, and of course, in the meantime, cloud licenses. All of them work in the same way, but the customer activates these licenses in such a container, and then the customer can use the application according to the licenses you have sold to them. This is possible online and offline. It's very important for industrial use cases where you do not have a connection, sometimes not at all as an online connection. So it is possible to activate the licenses online or offline. And how does that work? The rollout of the licenses is done by our CodeMeter License Central. It's the entitlement server of WIBU-SYSTEMS that is located either in your vendor data center, or we host that for you. And it's the connection between you as a vendor. You want to roll out licenses to the end users on the right side. It's a 5-step process. So a purchase order comes in from an ERP system, or you can use the visual interface of the CodeMeter License Central. And the CodeMeter License Central has all the products in the database that you want to sell as a license to your customers. At the end, the result of such a request in number 1 is a so-called ticket, an activation code that is transferred in step 3. It's a letter-digit code with divided by dashes. It's a very good password to allow the end user on the right side to activate licenses from the side of his device. It could be a PC, it could be also an industrial device. A fingerprint is created to have the hardware characteristics of the PC or the device, or you have the dongle. And together with the ticket, the License Central knows which licenses are assigned to a customer. And in step 5, these licenses are rolled out to the end user device so that all the licenses are available there. Offline in case of dongles and CMX licenses, and online if you use CM Cloud licenses. But let's check now how that really fits to the Cyber Resilience Act. And we picked out some of the parts of the Cyber Resilience Act to show how CodeMeter can support you in that journey. So for example, in this Cyber Resilience Act, paragraph 10, 12, there is the need for measures to restore compliance. So the original text means from the time a product with digital elements is placed on the market and during the expected product lifetime, or for a period of 5 years from the placing on the market. You have to be aware that you are compliant, and if you are not compliant, then there is the need to have corrective measures in place. And in case if you use licenses, that means you can withdraw or replace licenses in the field if a certain functionality of your software is no longer compliant to the CRA. So just as an example, you have your application, you have the 3 functions, and now the function 2 is no longer compliant to CRA. You have to replace this function. And by, for example, a function 2a, you also have to replace the license on the end customer side. And so that's possible with our process that I have shown before with the License Central. You just replace the license. The existing license 2 is replaced by a license 2a, so that you also see in your back office system that this license is replaced on the end customer side. We will see that later, how that supports the transparency of the delivery of licenses in that case. But not only replacing is a corrective measure, we also have the use case that you say, no, function 2 cannot longer be available in the field or maybe in certain regions of the world. So you really have to withdraw such a license. Here in this case, again, license number 2 is completely withdrawn, taken away from the customer, which means that the customer cannot use the function 2 any longer. Another point is add protection to your application. This, on the one side, this avoids tampering and, of course, illegal use of your software. What does that mean at the end? So again, we have the application, we have the licenses and the license containers here, and we add with our CodeMeter protection suite the possibility to encrypt your software, the overall software, the whole application, and in addition, the different functions that you have in your application, so that tampering is impossible, and you can only use these applications if you have the correct licenses. Reverse engineering is no longer possible, and that adds additional security, product security to your application. The keys are coming from the licenses itself. Our licenses are basically cryptographic keys with some characteristics which makes them to a license. For example, you can use that cryptographic key at the end of the year with the expiration date. You can use it 10 times using our unit counter. So that is the default system that you can use. There's another CRA, Annex 1 3C, which talks about confidentiality of software, and of data. So there is a need to protect the confidentiality of stored, transmitted, or otherwise processed personal or other data. And that means at the end, there is the need for encryption of data, which can be performed by the CodeMeter API. So here we have the latest status, we have the protected application, we have our license containers, and you use with your applications maybe additional data, you have parameters, you have log files that you write in the field. And you have now the possibility with the CodeMeter API to encrypt and of course decrypt these additional data with our CodeMeter API. The key can come from our licenses. As you know, our licenses are cryptographic keys, but you are also able to store your own cryptographic key in our licenses. We care about the secure transport of these keys, and we care about the security at the end, the license container on the customer side, even if it is on-premise. Another point is add identity. Who has access? What are their entitlements? So this is the CRA Annex 1, this time 3B, access protection. And the demand is provide protection against unauthorized access through appropriate control mechanisms. Authentication, for example, an identity or access management systems. So there's the need for access control and identities. And how does CodeMeter support that? So let's talk about specific license types. Again, we have our protected application, we have the license container, but now you can control the access to the application with certain licenses that you can define with our licensing toolbox. First of all, you can assign licenses to specific software versions. So you see here, the basic license belongs to version 1.0, and license 2, for example, belongs to version 1.1. So you can really say, I want to have a license for version 1.1, maybe because it's necessary for a certain industrial segment or for certifications that you need for your application in special regions. So this is a wonderful connection between version and the licensing. The licenses can also be restricted to specific countries. You can say, okay, I want to have licenses that only work in the United States, or work in Germany, or work in China. And you can, with this functionality, comply with legal export restrictions, local regulations, or clearances or certificates that you have for your software for a certain region in the world. So it's not possible to use the software or a certain functionality of your application where it is not certified. And last but not least, you can assign licenses to specific users and give them specific roles when they use the software. So you can say, I have standard users that are allowed to use certain functionalities of the application. You can have maintenance people that are allowed to use additional functionalities in the software, and they have more rights to use functionalities in the software. And you can really assign these licenses to a specific user that is logged in, for example, in Windows or Linux, or you have a certain assigning a list that says, okay, this person is allowed to use this license. So we have special license types that allow you to focus with the licenses on certain requirements that you have to fulfill with your software. In addition to that, we have access control also implemented for industrial devices. So for example, we have the CodeMeter keyring for the TIA portal of Siemens, where you can protect source code blocks, object blocks in the TIA portal, and you can make sure that only people with the right licenses on a CM dongle are allowed to open, use, or change such operational blocks. We are fully integrated with CodeMeter in codices, and we are fully integrated in Rockwell Studio 5000 for their Ella Bradley devices. Here we also protect with our security the executable files that are transferred to an industrial device and executed on an industrial device. So you have not only control about the source code of your project, you also have control about the usage on such an industrial device. With the CodeMeter certificate vault, we have the possibility, or you have the possibility, to store X509 certificates in a dongle, and we give you an API to use these certificates, for example, with the standard protocols PKCS11 and OpenSSL. We can use that, for example, for OPC UA connections that has to be secured by a certificate. And what I mentioned before, you have the possibility to use your own cryptographic keys, which can be stored in CM dongles, CM Act licenses, and CM Cloud licenses using our product item option secret data. These keys can only be used and cannot be read from the container. So it's a perfect solution for your own keys that you want to use to encrypt, to decrypt, or to sign applications or data. And that's the right buzzword for the next thing, integrity. CRA Annex 1, this time 3D, protect the integrity of stored, transmitted, or otherwise processed data. And that means more or less the need for validation of signatures. And with our CodeMeter protection suite and the CodeMeter API, you are able to perform that. We see that here in this example. So we have a signed application and we have data that is signed, and you can validate if that data is really your data and not tampered by a third party, not changed by a third party, and you can rely on the data that you are using. Same thing with your own libraries. So if you have dynamic link libraries or shared objects, you can automatically, with our protection suite, implement such a validation process that allows you to check the integrity, the signature of the library and the application itself. So you can trust that you are really working with the environment that you have defined from a security standpoint. And don't forget, we have updates in the field. There is every time the need for an update for software, and you have to make sure that this update is really your update and not an evil update from a third party that you do not want to have as an update for your application. Coming back to the CRA 1012, measures to restore compliance. To be able to contact affected customers in the event of an unforeseen problem, it must be known when which software in which version was delivered to which customers. And that's exactly the point that we have, that I have mentioned before. How do we track where the licenses are sent to which customer and what happens with that licenses? So you also know the License Central. In the meantime, we have now, in addition, the CodeMeter license portal on top of the License Central, which allows you to have a tier-based deployment system, or more or less a self-user, using licensing mechanism, where you can define as an ISV admin several groups. I have an example here. So if you have OEM partners, you can create for each OEM partner that you have an own group, allow them to, or assign them licenses, or even allow them to create their own licenses for their purposes. And in the next tier, group 11 and group 12, you see that the OEM partners are able to create customer tier for their larger customers, and allow the customers to assign users to licenses that are created either by you as an ISV admin or by an OEM partner. You can even give these roles to or this authentication and authorization to create licenses to the customer itself in certain cases. So you have the possibility to assign authentications and authorizations through that tree. And on the other side, you get the license status report back, so you know which license is assigned to which user at the end of that tree. And if the license is already activated, if it is available, if it can be renewed, these statuses can be delivered back to the License Central and in the license portal, so that you have the full transparency which license was delivered to whom and who activates the license or is able to activate the license at the end. How can you track the software deployment? We just talked about the license deployment, but the software deployment is also an important point. So if we have the authentications and authorizations for the licenses, we can combine that with an electronic software distribution server, where your customers can download the software that they are allowed to download. So if they have the right for using the software package 1, the licenses for software package 1, you only show them in this CodeMeter license portal the download link for software package 1 or software package 2, or if there is an update for software package 3, the software package 3A, you give the license for, or if you have the license for the software package 3, you show them the software package 3 and the update for software package 3A, and so on. So the licensing grants access for the download of software packages in addition with the electronic software distribution server that can be connected to the CodeMeter license portal, or we can implement that in for your own requirements. So as a summary, CodeMeter is an enabler for CRA compliance for your product security. Licensing means assign licenses to dedicated users, versions, or countries. You have the control of access and usage of the licenses. You can track the deployment and status in the field. If there is a compliance conflict, you can, of course, replace or withdraw licenses in the field. And you can use these processes for software and devices. So if you have plain software, no problem. If you have devices, embedded devices, for example, this is exactly the same process, the same technology of CodeMeter that can be used for both of them. Protection is very important for protect your software libraries and data against tampering and reverse engineering. You don't want to lose your intellectual property. You can protect your software against unauthorized use and then check the integrity of software data and updates. And all these measures here are base of your compliance journey to the Cyber Resilience Act. The products from WIBU-SYSTEMS that helps you in that during that journey is, of course, the CodeMeter API, the CodeMeter protection suite that allows the encryption, the automatic encryption of software and data. You have the CodeMeter License Central as base of the rollout process of the licenses. I mentioned the electronic software deployment connection of the license portal, and of course the license portal itself with the tier-based roles and authentication and authorization functionalities. We have the CodeMeter certificate vault, and we have the different industrial solutions that we have. I mentioned here the CodeMeter keyring for tier portal. And to summarize, all of them, compliance and monetization walk hand in hand with CodeMeter. Yes, you have to spend money to be CRA compliant, but with that licensing mechanism in the background, you can also monetize your software. So you are protecting and being compliant, but you also earn money with your licenses, with your licensing mechanisms. And of course, very important statement, the components of CodeMeter are, of course, CRA compliant. Thank you very much for your time. Now we have time for some questions, and let's see if we have questions.
Well, there was one question. What happens if the manufacturer is outside of the EU? Well, the obvious answer is CRA is not a topic for you, but the direct consequence is if you're not CRA compliant, you cannot sell into the EU. So even if you're outside of the EU, you probably have to think about what to do with CRA. And even if you don't sell it here, but have somebody else selling it, this person will have to deliver all the documentation for the CRA.
And I see another question in the chat, an interesting question. What happens if I use open source software in my application?
Well, open source software is a problem. It has two aspects. One thing is you provide open source software yourself. Then you don't have to comply with CRA unless you monetize them. So if you don't make profit from it, you don't have to comply when producing open source. If you try to use an open source component, then you as a manufacturer of the product have to comply with CRA and have to deal with problems in this software. If there are patches in the open software, you have to embed these patches. If there aren't any patches, you have to deal with the weaknesses yourself. So you either have to implement your own patches, or you have to implement some other measures that will counter these security weaknesses.
And there is another question. Does CodeMeter protection works with binaries in Linux, especially when they are shipped inside a container? Yes, CodeMeter supports, beside Windows, of course, Linux and Mac OS operating systems, but also embedded operating systems like Linux ARM, like QNH, of course, CodeSys, I mentioned that before. So yes, there is support of all the major operating systems. And even if there is no operating system, we can at least support you with our API in ANSI C source code so that you can integrate that in your own applications. The question concerning virtual environments inside a container. Yes, we are also supporting virtual environments. Here, we have an additional paper that I can highly recommend about the Kubernetes support and how to handle the licensed containers in virtual environments, because there are several threats using CM Act licenses, for example, or software license in general in virtual environments, but we have solutions for that as well. Good, so thank you very much for your time. You see here in the last slide, you can contact us for more questions, for discussions with our experts. I want to thank you very much, and I hope we will hear and see us again during our next webinar. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.